Insider trading. If you're an ordinary American and you trade stocks based on non-public information, you go to prison. This is insider trading, and it's a serious federal crime. Martha Stewart served 5 months in federal prison for selling stock based on a tip about an FDA decision. Raj Rajaratnam got 11 years for insider trading. The SEC prosecutes dozens of people every year for trading on inside information. If you're a member of Congress, you can trade stocks based on classified briefings, closed-door meetings, and advanced knowledge of legislation that will affect markets. This was completely legal until 2012. Members of Congress have access to information that moves markets. They attend classified intelligence briefings. They know about upcoming legislation before it's announced. They meet with CEOs and industry leaders in closed sessions. They learn about government contracts, regulatory decisions, and policy changes before the public knows. And for decades, they traded stocks based on this information with no legal consequences. A 2011 study found that senators' stock portfolios outperformed the market by 12% annually, far better than professional investors. Representatives' portfolios beat the market by 6% annually. This isn't skill. This is trading on information you're not supposed to have. In 2012, after public outcry, Congress passed the Stock Act, supposedly banning insider trading by members of Congress. The law required politicians to report stock trades within 45 days and prohibited them from trading on non-public information gained through their positions. But the Stock Act has no real enforcement. Violating it carries a maximum fine of $200, not $200,000. Just $200, and that fine is rarely imposed. Since the Stock Act passed, dozens of members of Congress have violated its reporting requirements. The fines assessed total less than $5,000 combined. Most violations result in no penalty at all. More importantly, the Stock Act doesn't actually stop politicians from insider trading. It just requires them to report it after the fact. They can still attend a classified briefing about a pandemic, immediately sell their hotel and travel stocks, buy pharmaceutical stocks, then report it 45 days later. By the time the public knows about the trades, the profits are locked in. This happened in 2020. In January and February, senators attended classified briefings about COVID-19 before the public knew how serious it was. Several senators immediately sold millions in stocks that would be affected by the pandemic and bought stocks that would benefit. When the market crashed in March, these senators had already protected their wealth. Senator Richard Burr sold up to $1.7 million in stocks after receiving classified COVID briefings, then told his constituents publicly that everything was fine. Senator Kelly Loeffler sold millions in stocks and bought shares in remote work technology. Senator Dianne Feinstein sold millions. Senator Jim Inhofe sold hundreds of thousands. The Department of Justice investigated. They closed the investigations without charges. No one went to prison. Burr paid no fine. Loeffler paid no fine. They kept their profits. They kept their seats in Congress. No consequences. If you had done this, attended a private meeting, learned about a coming crisis, traded stocks based on that information, you'd be in federal prison. When senators do it, investigations close quietly and life goes on. The Stock Act was supposed to fix this. It didn't. Politicians still trade on inside information. They still profit from knowledge that would get you arrested. The only difference is now they file paperwork about it. Sexual harassment settlements. If you sexually harass someone at work, you get fired and possibly sued. Your company might settle the lawsuit, but you personally face consequences. Your career suffers. Your reputation is destroyed. You might face criminal charges depending on what you did. If you're a member of Congress and you sexually harass someone, taxpayers pay the settlement and your name stays secret. Congress has a special office called the Office of Congressional Workplace Rights that handles harassment and discrimination claims against members of Congress. When a congressional employee is harassed by a representative or senator, they can file a claim through this office. The process is designed to protect politicians, not victims. The victim must go through mandatory counseling and mediation. They must sign non-disclosure agreements. They cannot talk publicly about what happened. If they reach a settlement, the money comes from a special treasury fund, meaning taxpayers pay for the congressman's misconduct. Between 1997 and 2017, the Office of Congressional Workplace Rights paid out $17 million in settlements for various claims including sexual harassment, discrimination, and retaliation. The names of the accused members of Congress were kept secret. Taxpayers paid millions, and the public never knew which politicians were being accused. In 2017, after Summer Me Too, Congress passed reforms requiring members to personally reimburse the Treasury for harassment settlements. This sounds good until you realize it only applies going forward and there's no enforcement mechanism. Politicians are supposed to voluntarily pay back the money. Whether they actually do is unclear. More importantly, the settlements still require non-disclosure agreements. Victims still can't speak publicly. The cases still don't go to normal courts. And politicians still face no criminal consequences for behavior that would destroy anyone else's career. Representative John Conyers had multiple sexual harassment allegations and settled at least one with taxpayer money. He resigned only after the allegations became public through leaked information, not through any official process. He faced no criminal charges. He kept his congressional pension. Senator Al Franken resigned after harassment allegations, but only because photos of his misconduct became public. If there had been no photos, the allegations would have gone through the secret Office of Congressional Workplace Rights process. Settlements would have been paid with tax money, and the public would never have known. Dozens of other cases remain secret. We know taxpayers paid $17 million. We know that money settled harassment and discrimination claims. We don't know which members of Congress were accused because the system is designed to protect them. If you harass someone at work, you'd be fired immediately and possibly prosecuted. When politicians do it, taxpayers pay the settlement. Victims are silenced with NDAs, and the politician's name stays secret. Two different systems. Exemptions from their own laws. When Congress passes laws regulating workplace conditions, discrimination, safety, and employee rights, those laws apply to private companies and most government agencies. They don't always apply to Congress itself. For decades, Congress exempted itself from major civil rights and workplace laws. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 prohibited discrimination in employment, except in Congress. The Americans with Disabilities Act required workplace accommodations, except in Congress. The Family and Medical Leave Act guaranteed unpaid leave for family emergencies, except for congressional employees. This wasn't an oversight. Congress explicitly wrote exemptions for itself into the laws. They passed regulations for everyone else while exempting themselves from the same rules. In 1995, Congress passed the Congressional Accountability Act, supposedly subjecting itself to the same laws as everyone else. But the act created a separate system for congressional employees to file complaints. The Office of Congressional Workplace Rights mentioned earlier. This system is weaker than normal employment law enforcement, with mandatory mediation, long delays, and limited remedies. More importantly, many laws still don't apply to Congress the same way they apply to you. The Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, is the most famous example. The ACA required most Americans to buy health insurance or pay a penalty. It created exchanges where people could shop for plans. It set minimum coverage standards. These requirements applied to you. Congress exempted itself. Members of Congress and their staff get their health insurance through the Federal Employee Health Benefits Program, which existed before the ACA and wasn't changed by it. They didn't have to use the exchanges they created for everyone else. They didn't face the same penalties or requirements. When this became public, Congress amended the law to require members and staff to get insurance through the ACA exchanges. But they also arranged for the government to continue paying 72% of their premiums as an employer contribution, something not available to Americans buying insurance on the exchanges themselves. So, technically, members of Congress use Obamacare. Practically, they get massive subsidies that ordinary Americans don't get, ensuring their costs stay low while yours increase. This pattern repeats across many laws. Congress passes regulations, then ensures those regulations don't apply to them the same way, or creates special exemptions and benefits that offset any burden. You have to follow the laws Congress passes. Congress writes itself exceptions. Two systems. Campaign finance versus bribery. If you give a politician money in exchange for favorable treatment, that's bribery, and you both go to prison. Bribery is a serious federal crime, carrying up to 15 years in prison. If a corporation gives a politician money through campaign donations, PACs, and super PACs, then that politician votes for legislation favorable to that corporation. It's legal campaign finance. The distinction is supposed to be clear. Campaign donations are legal support for a candidate's election. Bribes are illegal payments for specific official acts. But in practice, the line has been erased completely. In 2016, the Supreme Court overturned the conviction of Virginia Governor Bob McDonnell on corruption charges. McDonnell had received $175,000 in gifts and loans from a businessman, then arranged meetings and hosted events promoting the businessman's company. The lower courts convicted him of corruption, trading official acts for personal benefits. The Supreme Court overturned the conviction, ruling that arranging meetings and hosting events aren't official acts under federal bribery law. The court set a standard so narrow that almost nothing politicians do counts as bribery anymore. Unless you literally vote a certain way in direct exchange for a specific payment, it's not bribery. It's just politics. This opened the floodgates. Politicians can now accept campaign donations, gifts, speaking fees, and promises of future employment from corporations, then vote for those corporations' interests, as long as there's no explicit quid pro quo written down somewhere. The practical result: legalized bribery. Pharmaceutical companies donate millions to politicians, who then vote against drug price regulations. Defense contractors donate millions to politicians, who then vote for weapons contracts. Banks donate millions to politicians, who then vote to deregulate banking. The politicians claim the donations don't influence their votes. They just happen to believe in the same policies the donors want. And under current law, that's enough. As long as there's no email saying, "I'll vote for your bill if you pay me," it's legal. Meanwhile, if you try the same thing, give a city councilman $5,000 for his campaign, then ask him to vote for your construction permit. You can both be charged with bribery. The law applies to small-scale local corruption, but not to billion-dollar influence operations at the federal level. Senator Robert Menendez was charged with bribery for accepting gifts from a donor and taking actions to benefit that donor's business interests. The first trial ended in a hung jury. The second trial in 2024 resulted in conviction, but he remained in the Senate for months during appeals, something impossible for ordinary convicted criminals. But most politicians never face charges because they follow the post-McDonnell playbook: accept donations, attend events, arrange meetings, vote favorably, but never write down the connection. It's bribery in function, but legal in form. If you paid a government official for favorable treatment, you'd go to prison. When corporations pay politicians millions and get billions in favorable votes, it's campaign finance. Two systems. Drunk driving. If you drive drunk and get caught, you're arrested, charged with DUI, and face fines, license suspension, possible jail time, and a permanent criminal record. If you hurt or kill someone while drunk driving, you face felony charges and years in prison. If you're a politician and drive drunk, you might get a ride home from the police. This has happened repeatedly. Politicians caught driving drunk receive treatment that ordinary citizens never get. Warnings instead of arrests, rides home instead of jail, charges dropped instead of prosecution. In 2006, Representative Patrick Kennedy crashed his car into a barrier on Capitol Hill at 2:45 a.m. Police reported he appeared intoxicated and claimed he was late for a vote, though no votes were scheduled at 3 a.m. He wasn't given a sobriety test. He wasn't arrested. He was driven home. He later admitted he'd taken prescription drugs and shouldn't have been driving. If you had crashed your car at 3 a.m., appeared intoxicated, and told police you were late for work, you'd have been tested, arrested, and charged with DUI. Kennedy got a ride home. In 2012, Representative Vern Buchanan's campaign manager was arrested for DUI. Buchanan called the police chief and the sheriff asking them to help out his campaign manager. The charges were reduced. Normal citizens don't get to call the sheriff to help with DUI charges. In 2013, Representative Trey Riddell was arrested for cocaine possession, a felony. He got probation and resigned from Congress. No jail time for felony drug possession. Normal people caught buying cocaine go to prison for years. Riddell got probation and kept his congressional pension. State legislators show the same pattern. In Montana, state legislator David Howard was arrested for DUI. He was driving with a blood alcohol level nearly double the legal limit. He pleaded guilty, paid a fine, and continued serving in the legislature. He later ran for Congress. In Texas, State Representative Pancho Navarez was caught on camera dropping a bag of cocaine in the airport. He admitted it was his. He faced no charges. He didn't resign. He simply chose not to run for re-election later. Possessing cocaine is a felony in Texas. Navarez faced no prosecution. The pattern repeats. Politician commits crime, police give preferential treatment, charges are dropped or reduced, and the politician faces minimal consequences. This happens because politicians have relationships with police departments and prosecutors. They vote on their budgets, attend events with them, and have personal connections. When a politician gets pulled over drunk, the officer knows who they are. That familiarity creates favoritism that ordinary citizens never receive. If you drive drunk, you get arrested, charged, and convicted. If a politician drives drunk, they might get a ride home and a warning. Two systems. Conflicts of interest. If you work for a government agency and make decisions that benefit companies you own stock in, that's a conflict of interest and potentially a crime. Federal employees face strict ethics rules, preventing them from participating in matters where they have financial interests. If you're in Congress, you can vote on legislation that directly affects companies you own stock in, and it's completely legal. Members of Congress are exempt from most conflict of interest laws. They can own stocks, real estate, and businesses and industries they regulate. They can vote on bills that increase the value of their investments. They can pass legislation that benefits their personal finances. None of this violates any law. Senator Mitch McConnell's family has financial ties to Chinese shipping companies. He's voted on trade legislation affecting those companies. No conflict of interest violation. Senator Dianne Feinstein's husband's company has received government contracts. She's voted on budgets affecting those contracts. No conflict of interest violation. Representative Nancy Pelosi's husband trades millions in tech stocks. She votes on technology regulation. No conflict of interest violation. Representative Jim Jordan owns rental properties. He votes on housing policy and landlord-tenant regulations. No conflict of interest violation. This isn't partisan. Both parties do it. The system allows it. In private companies, executives must recuse themselves from decisions affecting their personal investments. Government employees must divest from industries they regulate or recuse themselves from relevant decisions. These rules are strictly enforced. Congress exempted itself from these rules. Representatives and senators can maintain unlimited investments in industries they regulate. They can vote on bills that directly affect their portfolios. They can own stock in companies they're supposed to oversee. The only requirement is disclosure. They must report their assets annually, but disclosure doesn't prevent conflicts of interest. It just makes them public. Knowing your senator owns millions in pharmaceutical stocks doesn't stop them from voting against drug price controls. If you were a government employee and voted on contracts for companies you invested in, you'd be fired and possibly prosecuted. When members of Congress do it, it's legal as long as they disclose it. Two systems. Lying under oath. If you lie under oath during a trial or congressional testimony, you're guilty of perjury, a felony carrying up to 5 years in prison. The government prosecutes perjury cases regularly. You're under oath to tell the truth, and lying is a crime. If you're a politician and lie under oath, you might face political consequences, but probably not criminal charges. Attorney General Eric Holder testified to Congress that the Justice Department wasn't targeting journalists. Documents later showed the DOJ had labeled a Fox News reporter as a criminal co-conspirator to justify seizing his communications. Holder had lied under oath. He faced no perjury charges. Director of National Intelligence James Clapper testified to Congress in 2013 that the NSA did not collect data on millions of Americans. Edward Snowden's leaks months later proved this was false. The NSA was collecting phone records on millions of Americans. Clapper had lied under oath to Congress. He faced no perjury charges. Attorney General Jeff Sessions testified during his confirmation that he had no contacts with Russians during the 2016 campaign. It later emerged he had met with the Russian ambassador twice. Sessions amended his testimony, claiming he forgot. No perjury charges. Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh testified during his confirmation about his drinking habits and past behavior. Multiple witnesses disputed his testimony. Democrats accused him of perjury. He was confirmed anyway. No perjury charges. FBI Director James Comey testified about the Clinton email investigation. Republicans accused him of lying to Congress. No perjury charges. The pattern is clear. Politicians and political appointees lie under oath regularly. Sometimes they face political backlash. Sometimes they lose their jobs. But they almost never face perjury prosecution. Meanwhile, ordinary people go to prison for lying under oath. Martha Stewart went to prison partly for lying to federal investigators, not even under oath in court, just lying to FBI agents. Scooter Libby, a political appointee, was convicted of perjury and obstruction, but was later pardoned. The double standard exists because prosecuting politicians for perjury requires the DOJ to charge people in the same political system. Federal prosecutors are appointed by politicians. They're reluctant to charge other politicians with crimes, especially perjury, which is hard to prove and requires showing the lie was material and intentional. So politicians lie under oath, get caught lying, and face no criminal consequences. They might lose elections, they might resign, but they don't go to prison. If you lied under oath, you'd be prosecuted and imprisoned. When politicians lie under oath, they face political consequences at worst. Two systems. Insider information for personal gain. Beyond stock trading, members of Congress profit from insider information in other ways that would be illegal for you. If you learned through your government job that certain land would be valuable due to upcoming infrastructure projects, then bought that land before the public knew, that would be corruption. Federal employees are prohibited from using inside government information for personal financial gain. If you're in Congress, you can do exactly that, and it's legal. Members of Congress learn about upcoming highway projects, military base expansions, government facility relocations, and infrastructure development before the public. This information can make land in certain areas extremely valuable. Some members of Congress have purchased land in areas where they knew government projects would increase property values. They voted for the projects, then profited when the land values increased exactly as they knew they would. In the 2000s, Representative Dennis Hastert, the Speaker of the House, bought land near a planned highway interchange. He then earmarked $207 million for the highway project. When the project was announced publicly, his land value increased by $2 million. He sold it at a massive profit. This was legal. Hastert faced no charges for this. He later went to prison for an unrelated crime, structuring cash transactions to hide hush money payments. But the land deal was never prosecuted because it wasn't illegal for members of Congress. Other examples: politicians buying property near planned government facilities, then voting to approve those facilities. Politicians investing in industries just before voting for subsidies for those industries. Politicians receiving book deals for enormous advances just after passing legislation beneficial to the publisher. The book deal loophole is particularly egregious. Publishers give politicians multi-million-dollar advances for books that will never sell enough copies to earn back the advance. This is effectively a legal bribe. The publisher pays the politician millions. The politician delivers a manuscript, sometimes ghostwritten. The book sells poorly, and the publisher writes off the loss. Why would a publisher pay millions for a book that won't make money? Because that politician votes on regulations affecting the publisher's parent company, or because the publisher wants access and influence. Sarah Palin got a $125 million book advance. Hillary Clinton got an $8 million advance. Barack Obama got a $65 million joint advance for him and Michelle. These advances far exceeded what the books would earn. Is this bribery? Functionally, yes. Legally, no. It's a book deal. The fact that the publisher loses money doesn't matter. The fact that the publisher has interest before Congress doesn't matter. As long as it's structured as a publishing contract, it's legal. If you were a government employee and received millions from a company you regulate, that would be corruption. When politicians do it through book deals, speaking fees, or consulting arrangements after leaving office, it's legal income. Two systems. Exemption from healthcare laws. Beyond the ACA, politicians have ensured they receive better healthcare than what's available to ordinary Americans under the laws they pass. Members of Congress have access to the Office of the Attending Physician, a private medical clinic in the Capitol. For a small annual fee, around $600, members get unlimited access to doctors, basic medical care, and routine procedures without dealing with insurance, networks, or copays. This is concierge medicine, the kind of service that costs ordinary Americans thousands per year. Members of Congress get it for $600. Additionally, they have access to military hospitals for more serious care, often at reduced or no cost. This is healthcare that doesn't go through normal insurance processes and isn't subject to the limitations that apply to civilian care under Medicare or private insurance. When members of Congress debate healthcare policy, they're debating what you should have access to, not what they have access to. They have government-provided, low-cost, high-quality care, regardless of what system they vote to impose on citizens. This creates a perverse incentive structure. Politicians don't personally experience the healthcare systems they create. If the ACA's insurance exchanges are dysfunctional, members of Congress don't care. They're not using them. If Medicare reimbursements are too low and doctors stop accepting Medicare patients, members of Congress don't care. They're not on Medicare. They're voting on your health care while exempting themselves from experiencing it. This ensures they never feel the consequences of bad health care policy. Revolving door employment. If you work as a government regulator, you're prohibited from immediately taking a job with companies you regulated. There are cooling-off periods and ethics restrictions designed to prevent conflicts of interest. These rules apply to low and mid-level government employees. They barely apply to members of Congress and senior officials. When members of Congress leave office, they often become lobbyists for the industries they used to regulate. They leverage their connections, knowledge of the legislative process, and relationships with former colleagues to influence policy for corporate clients. This is the revolving door, going from regulating an industry to being paid by that industry to influence regulations. The only restriction is a one-year cooling-off period before former members of Congress can lobby their former colleagues directly. But this is easily circumvented. Former members can immediately work as strategic advisors to lobbying firms, doing everything except the literal act of meeting with current members. After 1 year, they become registered lobbyists. Former Senator Chris Dodd, who chaired the Banking Committee and wrote the Dodd-Frank Financial Regulation Law, became the CEO of the Motion Picture Association, a lobbying organization, immediately after leaving the Senate. Former Senator Trent Lott became a lobbyist. Former Speaker John Boehner became a lobbyist for the cannabis industry after leaving Congress. Dozens of former members of Congress are now lobbyists. They make far more money lobbying than they did in Congress. The average lobbyist with congressional experience makes over $400,000 annually. Some make millions. This creates an obvious conflict of interest while they're in office. If you know you can make millions as a lobbyist after leaving Congress, you have an incentive to be friendly to the industries you'll later lobby for. You won't regulate them too harshly because they might employ you later. For ordinary government employees, this would be corruption. The cooling-off periods are longer, the restrictions are stricter, and the ethics rules are enforced. For members of Congress, it's a career path. Two systems. 10 things illegal for you, but legal for politicians. Insider trading. You go to prison, they file paperwork and keep the profits. Sexual harassment. You get fired and sued. Taxpayers pay their settlements and their names stay secret. Laws they pass apply to you, not to them. Campaign donations. Bribery when you do it. Legal speech when corporations do it. Drunk driving. You get arrested, they get rides home. Conflicts of interest. You must divest or recuse. They can vote on bills affecting their portfolios. Lying under oath. You're prosecuted for perjury. They face political consequences at worst. Using government information for personal profit. Corruption when you do it. Smart investing when they do it. Healthcare exemptions. They mandate insurance for you while getting concierge care for themselves. Revolving door employment. Restricted for you, lucrative career path for them. The pattern is undeniable. The rules that apply to ordinary Americans don't apply to the political class. They've written laws with exemptions for themselves. They've created enforcement systems that protect them. They've arranged their affairs to profit from their positions in ways that would send you to prison. This isn't conspiracy theory. These are documented facts. Members of Congress have traded on inside information and face no charges. They've settled harassment claims with taxpayer money and kept their names secret. They've exempted themselves from laws they passed. They've received what anyone else would call bribes and called them campaign donations. They've driven drunk and gotten rides home instead of arrests. They've voted on legislation affecting their investments. They've lied under oath and faced no perjury charges. They've used government information for personal profit. They've gotten better health care than they provide to citizens. They've left office to lobby for industries they used to regulate. Each of these things would destroy your life if you did them. When politicians do them, they face minimal or no consequences. The justice system treats you and politicians differently. You're subject to laws. They're subject to political pressure at worst. When prosecutors decide whether to charge someone with insider trading, perjury, or corruption, they consider who the person is. A corporate executive trading on inside information gets prosecuted. A senator doing the same thing gets investigated and cleared. A citizen lying to federal investigators goes to prison. A cabinet official lying to Congress faces no charges. This creates two Americas. In one America, laws are strictly enforced, violations carry serious penalties, and breaking the rules destroys your life. In the other America, laws have exemptions, violations are overlooked, and consequences are political rather than criminal. You live in the first America. Politicians live in the second. The founders feared exactly this, a political class that places itself above the law. They designed a system of checks and balances to prevent it, but those checks have failed. Congress writes its own ethics rules and creates its own exemptions. The executive branch prosecutes crimes but rarely charges politicians. The judiciary interprets laws in ways that narrow corruption statutes and protect political speech. The result is institutionalized inequality before the law. The principle that everyone is equal under the law, the foundation of democratic justice, has been abandoned. Politicians argue that they need these protections to do their jobs. Insider trading laws might prevent them from trading stocks freely. Conflict of interest rules might make it impossible to hold investments. Strict enforcement of perjury might chill political debate. These arguments are self-serving garbage. Ordinary government employees operate under strict ethics rules and manage to do their jobs. Federal employees divest from conflicted industries. Military officers avoid conflicts of interest. Judges recuse themselves from cases where they have financial interests. All of these people serve the public under rules stricter than those applied to Congress. There's no reason members of Congress need exemptions from insider trading laws, conflict of interest rules, or ethics requirements. The real reason they maintain these exemptions is because they profit from them. The solution is simple. Apply the same laws to politicians that apply to everyone else. Eliminate exemptions. Enforce insider trading laws against members of Congress the same way they're enforced against corporate executives. Prosecute perjury by politicians the same way it's prosecuted against ordinary citizens. Eliminate the Special Office of Congressional Workplace Rights and subject Congress to normal employment law. Ban members of Congress from trading individual stocks. Enforce strict conflict of interest rules. Extend cooling-off periods for lobbying to at least 5 years. None of this will happen because the people who would have to pass these laws are the same people benefiting from the current system. They won't vote to restrict themselves. So the two-tiered justice system continues. You follow strict laws with harsh penalties. Politicians follow looser standards with minimal consequences. You live in a country where laws apply unequally, where your representatives have exempted themselves from the rules they impose on you, where justice is available to some but not all. 10 things illegal for you, but legal for politicians. 10 pieces of evidence that you're not living in a society with equal justice under law. 10 examples of a political class that's placed itself above the people it's supposed to serve. The question isn't whether this is happening. The evidence is overwhelming. The question is whether you're going to accept it.